a threat will rise.
We've proven we can strike at you anytime, anywhere.
Fear will grow.
Today, America is under siege.
The casualty estimate in St. Louis has risen to 112. Baltimore is even worse.
Cities have been targeted by a series of terror attacks.
Almost 1,000 civilians are dead.
Once again, the streets are flowing with blood.
If we don't stop these attacks, this country will never recover.
24.
Once Taliban took control of all of our they have the passport office over there making legitimate passports. Now there's 21 terrorist organizations over there training. Hamza bin Laden, who we were told was killed, is actually alive. And he's marrying into all these other terrorist networks. So he married Mullah Omar's daughter. These guys used to be like competitors, just like the UFO guys. They all hate each other, but they all have the one common theme, like disclosure. These guys, the one common thing is let's go take over the Western world. What they're doing is they're funneling as many of these terrorists into the passport office, creating them legitimate, real passports. They get them flights all over South Central America, and then they funnel them up through the Darien Gap to the U.S. And so I don't give a fuck what the FBI or any of these people are saying. There is zero way to track how many of these fuckers have come into the U.S. What we're going to see is October 7th style attacks like we just saw in Israel, in the mall in Russia.
Do you
Why
think
hasn't
this
it happened
is
yet?
by design?
How many terrorists did you mention are believed to have crossed the border from some of these other countries where they've been committing terrorism and in some way connected to the Benghazi attackers?
Well, the number I shared on Chad's show, the 1,500, that's not international terrorists. That 1,500 is just the assessment of terrorists I believe have come from Afghanistan. So goodness. The number of terrorists could be much larger than that. I
do fear that the Season 6 of 24 could be a very, very real thing. And you did share some things on a previous podcast about like what preparedness people can take. If people were to have some kind of situational awareness, if you will, what signs can they be looking for?
You know, when you talk about situational awareness, it's really situational, spatial, and environmental awareness that you really need. But when you talk about signs, so they're just everyday things that we would look for where something isn't right. One thing by itself could be nothing, but 2, 3, 4 things together, in law enforcement, we call it clue. So there's nothing like in particular that would say, hey, that's terrorism attack's going to happen. It's just having a baseline. What's the baseline for this environment? Now, what's different about this? What doesn't fit in this baseline? And those are things you can look for, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. No, absolutely. Just look for, I guess, pattern recognition or unrecognition. If that doesn't fit something else is up.
When we say like a baseline, well, we'll look for suspicious activity. Well, what's suspicious? If I'm in the hood, everything looks suspicious. But if I live there, it's just normal. So what's normal? What's your baseline for your environment? And then what stands out for that particular environment. And it's always going to be evolving depending on what environment you're in. So it's hard to say, well, look for this, look for that. Well, in a certain environment, that might be perfectly normal. For instance, when it comes to active shooters, a lot of law enforcement will say, well, look for heavy clothing, look for trench coats, look for hoodies. Well, here in Florida, every teenager wears a hoodie, even though it's 90 degrees out. Like, that's not vicious for this environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do remember, like, there was some discussions around the fact that, like, kind of near the border with Israel, a lot of phones were popping up that hadn't been before. Like, something like that is a sign, right? If there's now a bunch of phones in the area that hadn't been there before, kind of, outside your border, maybe it's something you'll need to look into. Again, something completely new, right? Completely different. You have to watch for those telltale signs because it's really the only way you're going to be proactive, right? You have to be alert to something different happening.